"Commander Vehl, you're not going to like this," said Sub-Commander Rain, her tone sharp and urgent. Her boots struck the cold alloy floor with a rhythmic purpose as she approached the command platform. Vehl, standing tall with an air of deliberate calm, didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on the swirling patterns projected by the fleet's laser plasma display, a three-dimensional map of the Calaxis Nebula, teeming with mysteries that had just become more unsettling. "Spare me the theatrics, Rain," Vehl replied, his voice steady as steel. "What have we found now?" Rain gestured, and the image shifted with a burst of refracted light. The hollow ruins of a long-dead planet loomed into focus. Scorched terrain sprawled beneath a pale atmosphere that seemed to thrum with unsaid warnings. A structure emerged on the display, a crumbled obelisk jutting from the blackened ground like a splinter of bone. "It's the 18th one," Rain said grimly. "Same message, same symbols, same warning." Vehl's jaw tightened. "Read it to me." She hesitated, her usual sharpness replaced by an almost imperceptible unease. "It says, 'Do not disturb the sleepers of Sol 3. Extinction awaits.'" The words lingered in the air like a bitter taste, a palpable weight pressing against the crew. Around them, subtle movements of the bridge officers betrayed their tension. Fingers tapped consoles with too much force. Eyes darted toward readouts as though searching for comfort in the data. Vehl exhaled slowly, his breath barely visible in the cool, climate-controlled atmosphere of the ship. The bridge was a haven of efficiency, filled with the low hum of life support systems and the quiet whir of data relays. Its sleek design, illuminated by the bluish glow of heads-up displays, felt worlds away from the ominous ruins they were analyzing. "That makes it 18 civilizations who've warned us off the same target," Vehl muttered, his gaze hardening. "Sol 3, Earth." He paused, his voice dropping to a murmur as if speaking the name carried its own danger. "Why would they all say the same thing?" "I can speculate," Rain offered, her crimson tactical uniform catching the glint of the displays as she leaned closer. "But none of the answers are good." "Then let's deal in facts," Vehl countered, his tone clipped. He turned to Lieutenant Kane, a quiet, methodical officer whose sharp intellect often outpaced his words. "What do the scans show?" Kane's fingers danced over his console, the fluid movements a stark contrast to the growing tension. "Residual energy signatures, Commander. Whatever happened there left scars on the fabric of the planet itself, but no signs of active life. The shield surrounding Sol 3 is still intact. No breaches. It's as if—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "As if it's waiting for something," Vehl finished, his voice devoid of doubt. Kane nodded. "Yes, sir. Exactly." Vehl's mind churned, a storm of questions battering against his disciplined focus. He knew the Vorshan coalition wouldn't allow this to remain a mystery. The idea of a dormant threat, one capable of inciting terror across millennia, was too dangerous to ignore, and too tempting to exploit. "Prepare the fleet," Vehl ordered. "We're moving in closer." Rain frowned. "You're not seriously considering breaking that shield, are you?" "I'm considering every option," Vehl replied, his voice like a blade slicing through hesitation. "The warnings aren't enough, not for the coalition. They'll want answers, so we'll get them, carefully." "Careful's not exactly in our doctrine," Rain muttered under her breath, earning a sharp glance from the commander. As the fleet closed in on the dead planet that had delivered its chilling message, the ship's sensors began to flicker with irregular spikes of activity. "Commander," Kane called out, his tone edged with unease, "I'm picking up something new, localized electromagnetic anomalies. It's almost like the planet itself is reacting." "Reacting to what?" Vehl asked, stepping closer to Kane's console. "To us," Kane said simply, the words landing like stones in the air. "Redirect power to the outer shields," Vehl commanded. "I want us prepared for anything. Rain, double-check the deployment orders. If this thing fights back, I want our fleets in formation before it has a chance to act." As Rain began issuing orders, a faint tremor coursed through the ship, barely perceptible but enough to silence the murmurs across the bridge. "Kane?" Vehl prompted, his voice now a razor's edge. "I don't know, Commander. It's coming from Sol 3. A pulse of energy, just faint enough to evade detection until we were right on top of it. I've never seen anything like it." Vehl clenched his fists, his mind racing. "Is it targeting us?" "Not directly," Kane replied, though his tone carried little relief. "It's spreading outward, slow, calculated, almost as if it's probing us." A chill crawled up Vehl's spine, a rare sensation he couldn't shake. He turned back to Ryan, her expression a mixture of defiance and trepidation. "Do you still think this is an empty threat?" he asked. Ryan hesitated, her usual bravado dimmed. "I don't know, Commander, but I don't like how it feels." Vehl gave her a rare nod of agreement. "Neither do I." The laser plasma display shifted again, this time zooming in on the shield surrounding Sol 3. It shimmered like a mirage, its surface alive with patterns that defied explanation. "Kane," Vehl said, his voice soft but firm, "what are we looking at here?" Kane hesitated. "A containment field, Commander, but it's more than that. The energy it's emitting, it's almost like it's alive." Vehl's brows furrowed, his thoughts turning darker with each passing second. He had faced countless battles, navigated political minefields, and outmaneuvered enemies who thought themselves invincible. But this was different. "Rain," he said quietly, his tone carrying the weight of command. "Tell the fleet to hold position. We're not moving an inch closer until we know exactly what we're dealing with." "And if we can't figure it out?" Ryan asked, her voice carrying an edge of challenge. "Then we make damn sure the galaxy knows this isn't something to be trifled with," Vehl replied. "Because whatever's down there, it's not just a relic of the past. It's waiting for us to make the first move." As the bridge settled into a tense silence, the laser plasma display flickered once more. This time it wasn't Kane's doing. A message began to form in glowing, jagged script, ancient and unreadable at first. But as the characters reconfigured themselves, a single phrase emerged. "You were warned." The temperature seemed to drop as every pair of eyes on the bridge locked onto the display. Vehl stared at the words, his chest tightening with a weight he hadn't felt in years. "Commander," Ryan whispered, her voice uncharacteristically small. "What do we do?" Vehl's gaze didn't waver. "We prepare, and we watch. Whatever happens next, we'll be ready." In the silence that followed, the stars beyond the bridge seemed just a little dimmer. The words glowed on the laser plasma display like embers searing into the darkness of the bridge. "You were warned." They pulsed faintly, each flicker casting an eerie rhythm of light and shadow across the room. "Commander, we're receiving a secondary transmission," Kane reported, his voice quieter than usual, as though afraid of disturbing whatever invisible presence had reached out to them. His hands hovered above his console, hesitant, his usual composure replaced with restrained unease. "It's encoded differently. It's not just a warning." "Play it," Vehl ordered, his tone clipped, betraying none of the unease creeping into his own chest. The speakers crackled to life, emitting a low, fragmented sequence of tones that wavered between order and chaos. The sound burrowed into the ears, sharp and unrelenting, like the scrape of metal against ice. Beneath the layers of distortion, something almost intelligible whispered through, a fragmented voice, guttural and ancient, its syllables fractured by time and decay. "Do not break the seal." The final word stretched, vibrating the air around them. It felt alive, as if the very sound sought to wrap itself around their throats and tighten. A chill danced along Vehl's spine, and for a fleeting moment he felt the weight of something incomprehensible pressing down on him, heavy and ancient, as though the warning itself carried the memories of those who had ignored it before. "That's no automated recording," Kane murmured, his hand brushing the edge of his console, as if grounding himself. "It doesn't matter what it is," Vehl snapped, regaining command of the moment. "We proceed with the mission. Ryan, recalibrate the sensors. Kane, I want full spectrum readings of the shield." Ryan frowned, her posture stiff. "You really think we're in control here, Commander?" "Control is a luxury. Preparation isn't. Get it done, Vehl replied. His voice didn't rise, but the weight of his words crushed any further protest. Outside the viewport, Sol 3 hung in the distance like a sleeping giant encased in a cocoon of light. The shield shimmered with unnatural colors, ripples of violet, streaks of emerald, pulses of deep crimson, all blending and shifting like a living aurora. Every fluctuation seemed deliberate, purposeful, as though the barrier was studying them as much as they were studying it. Kane's readings appeared on a secondary heads-up display. The shield isn't just passive energy, it's reacting to us. Every scan, every movement we make, it adjusts. Adjusts how? Vehl asked, stepping closer to Kane's station. Kane hesitated, his usually methodical demeanor cracking under the weight of uncertainty. It's analyzing us, Commander, our energy signatures, heat outputs, even the composition of our ships. It's like it's learning. Learning what? Ryan asked, tension sharpening her words. Kane shook his head. I don't know, but whatever this is, it's far beyond anything we've encountered. It's not just a shield. It's a system, an active defense mechanism. Vehl studied the pulsating barrier, his mind racing through every potential scenario. His instincts screamed to retreat, but the mission demanded answers. His fleet wasn't just a hammer. They were the scalpel the Vorshan coalition wielded when the galaxy needed a problem dissected. Prepare the breach team, Vehl ordered, his tone brokering no argument. You can't be serious, Rain said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. This shield isn't just going to let us walk in. You've seen the warnings, heard the message. Whatever's down there, it was sealed for a reason. Do you think I don't know that? Vehl shot back, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment the air between them bristled with unspoken tension, the kind born from years of navigating life and death together. But we don't have the luxury of fear. We're not here to cower at ancient stories. We're here to understand them. Rain's jaw tightened, but she nodded, her defiance cooling into reluctant compliance. The breach team assembled in the ship's hangar, a stark chamber lined with modular equipment and weapons that gleamed under harsh white lights. The scent of charged air filled the space, mingling with the faint metallic tang of the gear. Soldiers moved with precision, their movements efficient, their faces taut with focus. Drixon descended the gantry, his boots clicking against the steel, and approached Lieutenant Therick, leader of the breach team. Therick was tall, broad-shouldered, with a grizzled face that bore the scars of countless campaigns. He met Vehl's gaze with quiet resolve. You've read the brief, Vehl said, his tone low but firm. We're breaching an ancient defense system. Expect the unexpected, but stay sharp. Your team's survival depends on it. Therick nodded once, his expression carved from stone. We'll get it done, Commander. The breach pod, a sleek obsidian vessel bristling with cutting-edge technology, was loaded into the airlock. Its surface shimmered faintly with quantum shielding, a Vorshan innovation designed to counter unknown threats. As the pod launched, Vehl watched from the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. The heads-up display tracked its progress, showing the pod hurtling toward the shimmering shield. The moment the pod touched the barrier, the shield reacted violently. Colors exploded outward like a supernova, waves of energy rippling through the void and slamming into the fleet. The ship shuddered, and Vehl gripped the edge of the command console as alarms blared. "Status!" he barked. Kane's voice cut through the chaos. "The shield's output is spiking. It's retaliating." Ryan's fingers flew over her console. "We're detecting electromagnetic pulses, targeting our systems. Shields holding at 80%. The display shifted, showing the breach pod's interior. Therick and his team were strapped in, their expressions tense but focused as the pod's hull groaned under the shield's pressure. "We're through!" Therick's voice crackled over the comms, taut with controlled adrenaline. "The shield's destabilizing, temporarily. Whatever's controlling it doesn't like us being here." "Then don't stay longer than you have to," Vehl ordered. "Retrieve the data and extract immediately." Inside the shield, the breach pod descended toward Earth, its exterior battered by relentless energy surges. Below them, The planet's surface came into view, a fractured mosaic of desolation and eerie beauty. Towers of blackened stone jutted skyward like the skeletal remains of a long-dead colossus. Rivers of molten silver twisted through the ruins, their surfaces rippling with ghostly light. "This place," Theric muttered, his voice trailing off as he stared through the viewport. "It doesn't feel dead. It feels dormant." The pod landed with a hiss, its legs sinking into the ashen ground. The breach team deployed, their boots crunching against the brittle surface. The air was heavy, thick with an almost tangible stillness that pressed against their senses. Theric activated his scanner, its display flickering as it struggled to process the strange energy signatures saturating the environment. "Commander," he said, his voice steady but tinged with unease, "this isn't just a graveyard. It's a warning. Everything here, it's waiting for something to wake it up." Before Vehl could respond, a sudden surge of energy rippled through the shield, its colors intensifying to a blinding crescendo. "Commander!" Kane shouted. "The shield is closing!" Vehl's heart sank as he watched the breach pod's signal flicker. The team's comms went dead, leaving only the oppressive silence of the void. Vehl's fist clenched behind his back as he stared at the fading signal on the laser plasma display. The breach pod's icon pulsed weakly, veiled by interference rippling from the shield. Every few seconds, static-laden fragments of comm chatter reached the bridge, their meaning lost in a storm of distortion. "Keep working on the connection," Vehl ordered, his voice a low, contained growl. The weight of silence from the breach team pressed against his thoughts like a tightening vice. "I want them back online. Now." Rain glanced at him from her station, her usual sharpness tempered by unease. "If the shield's adapting as fast as we think, they're not just cut off. They're trapped." "That's an observation, not a solution," Vehl snapped, pivoting toward her. His eyes burned with unspoken frustration. "You're the tactical officer. Tact. Now." Ryan's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded, refocusing on her console. "We could deploy a secondary relay drone, but with the shield destabilizing, there's no guarantee it'll survive long enough to re-establish a link." "It doesn't need to survive," Vehl replied. "It just needs to work." Kane interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Commander, we're picking up an energy spike, originating from the moon." Vehl turned sharply toward the display. The moon's surface, previously dormant save for the faint flicker of ancient installations, now shimmered with sudden activity. Structures began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal arrays of weapons and machinery that radiated ominous energy signatures. "Defensive systems activating," Kane said, his voice taut but steady. "Targeting us." The first salvo came without warning. A streak of violet energy erupted from the moon, slicing through the darkness of space with ruthless intent. It slammed into the Vorshan fleet's forward shields, sending shockwaves rippling through the flagship. The deck beneath Vehl's boots vibrated violently, and the bridge lights flickered for a moment before stabilizing. "Report!" Vehl barked. "Shields holding, but we took a hit," Rain said, her hands flying across her console. "That wasn't a warning shot. They're testing us." "Then we'll test them back," Vehl said coldly. "Rain, form up the fleet. Focus fire on the moon's active installations. Kane, find me a weakness, something we can exploit before this gets worse." Rain relayed the orders, her voice cutting through the bridge like the crack of a whip. The Vorshan fleet moved into formation with lethal efficiency, their ships sleek and angular, designed for both speed and destruction. From the flagship's viewport, beams of golden energy lanced toward the moon, illuminating the void with fleeting brilliance. The moon's defenses responded in kind. Dozens of automated turrets fired in unison, their precision devastating. Pulses of energy arced across the fleet, each impact carrying the weight of ancient technology that felt unnervingly deliberate. Sparks rained from the ceiling as another blast rocked the flagship, and Vehl's grip tightened on the edge of his console. "Status on the breach pod," Vehl demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Kane's hands moved swiftly, his eyes darting across streams of data. Still no response. The shield's energy fluctuations are making it impossible to re-establish the link. "We don't have time for impossible," Vehl said. "If we don't get them out of there—" "Commander!" Rain interrupted, her tone sharp and urgent. "The moon's not our only problem." Vehl turned to her display, which now showed a new energy signature rising from the surface of Mars. A swarm of metallic drones erupted from an ancient facility, their movements unnervingly synchronized as they closed the distance toward the fleet. "Drones," Kane confirmed, his voice tight. "Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They're fast, faster than anything we've encountered before." "Adaptive?" Vehl asked. "Almost certainly," Kane replied. "They're analyzing our fleet movements, adjusting their patterns in real time." Vehl's jaw tightened as he surveyed the battle unfolding across the displays. The moon's defenses were relentless, and now Mars had joined the fray, its drones weaving through the fleet's formations like a school of predatory fish. Every decision he made felt like walking a tightrope, with no margin for error. "Deploy countermeasures," Vehl ordered. "Rain, coordinate the strike teams. I want those drones neutralized before they can breach our shields." Rain's response was immediate, her commands precise as she directed the fleet's fighter squadrons into action. The hangar bays of the flagship opened, releasing sleek, agile craft into the fray. The fighters darted toward the drones with surgical precision, their weapons lighting up the void with bursts of kinetic energy. On the bridge, Vehl monitored the battle with an intensity that seemed to consume him. Every movement, every decision was a thread in an intricate web of strategy. But even as the Vorshan fleet fought back, the tide of the battle felt inexorably tilted against them. "Kane," Vehl said, his voice low but firm, "what do we know about these drones? Weak points? Vulnerabilities?" Kane's fingers danced across his console as he sifted through the data. "They're fast and resilient, but their movements suggest a central control node. If we can locate and disable it—" "Then do it," Vehl interrupted, "and do it fast." As Kane worked, the battle continued to escalate. The moon's turrets fired relentlessly, their beams carving through space with terrifying accuracy. The drones from Mars swarmed the fleet, their sharp, angular forms glinting in the light of distant stars. Explosions dotted the void, brief bursts of destruction that punctuated the chaos. Vehl's mind raced as he balanced the demands of the battle with the gnawing worry for the breach team, still silent beneath the shield. He could feel the weight of every decision, every order pressing down on him like a physical force. "Commander," Kane said suddenly, his voice breaking through Vehl's thoughts. "I've pinpointed the control node. It's located within the Martian facility that launched the drones." Vehl nodded, his expression grim. "Rain, send in a strike team. Neutralize the node." Rain relayed the orders, her voice unwavering. "We'll handle it." As the strike team descended toward Mars, Vehl turned his attention back to the moon. The relentless fire from its turrets was taking a toll on the fleet, and he knew they couldn't sustain this level of damage for much longer. "Kane, what about the moon's defenses? Can we disable them?" Kane hesitated, his brow furrowing as he analyzed the data. "Possibly, but we'd need to get close. Too close." Vehl's jaw clenched, but he didn't hesitate. "Prepare a boarding team. If we can't take it out from here, we'll do it from the inside." The bridge fell silent for a moment, the weight of the decision sinking in. Then, with a nod from Vehl, the preparations began. As the flagship launched its assault pod toward the moon, Vehl felt the gravity of the situation settling over him like a leaden cloak. The battle was far from over, and every move they made seemed to awaken something deeper, something more dangerous. He glanced at the heads-up display one final time, watching as the assault pod disappeared into the moon's shadow. Somewhere beneath the surface, the answers they sought awaited them, along with the possibility of waking something far worse. The assault pod descended toward the moon, like a predator stalking its prey. Through its reinforced viewport, Lieutenant Therick and his team glimpsed the barren lunar surface, marred by craters that seemed unnaturally aligned, their symmetry whispering of design rather than randomness. The pod vibrated with the strain of its controlled descent, a tactile reminder of the pressure mounting on every side. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Therick's gloved fingers drummed lightly against his weapon as he surveyed his squad. Each of them sat rigid, their expressions betraying unease they wouldn't dare speak aloud. The red glow of the cabin's alert lights bathed them, casting sharp shadows that moved like restless spirits. "Touchdown in 60 seconds," the pilot called, his voice clipped, the strain of navigating through relentless turret fire evident. Theric adjusted his comm. "Team, focus. We're here to neutralize the node. No distractions. No heroics. Follow my lead, and we get out alive." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the squad. The pod's legs struck the ground with a jarring impact, dislodging a fine plume of dust that swirled in lazy spirals outside the viewport. The hatch hissed open, releasing the team into the dim, otherworldly light of the moon. The landscape stretched before them, a wasteland of shadows and pale dust, punctuated by towering monoliths of dark metal that hummed faintly with latent energy. Theric's boots crunched against the surface as he moved, his eyes scanning every crevice, every jagged silhouette. The monoliths exuded a quiet menace, their edges too sharp, their angles almost taunting the natural curves of the moon's terrain. "Stay sharp," he muttered, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. The team advanced in a staggered formation, their weapons raised, the faint glow of their visors cutting through the pervasive gloom. Each step seemed to amplify the unnatural stillness, the kind of silence that thrummed just beneath hearing, like a phantom waiting to pounce. "Lieutenant," one of the soldiers, Ensign Orlek, whispered, "these structures, they're not just defensive, they're—" "Save the analysis for later," Theric snapped, cutting him off. "Right now, eyes forward." Ahead, the entrance to the facility loomed, an archway carved into the base of one of the monoliths. The structure shimmered faintly, as though coated in a liquid sheen that refused to settle. A strange heat radiated from it, not enough to scorch, but enough to make the skin crawl. Theric signaled the team to halt, his hand raised as his eyes narrowed. The archway bore markings, alien symbols etched with surgical precision. They pulsed faintly, their patterns shifting with each breath of the moon's non-existent wind. "Kane, are you seeing this?" Theric asked, his comm linking directly to the fleet above. The reply crackled with interference, but Kane's voice came through. "Barely. You're deep in the interference zone. Those symbols, they look like a security mechanism. They're reacting to your proximity." "Reacting how?" Theric asked, stepping closer. The symbols flared suddenly, flooding the archway with light so bright it forced the team to shield their visors. A low, resonant hum vibrated the ground beneath their feet, and the liquid sheen began to ripple like disturbed water. "Lieutenant," Orlek muttered, his voice tight, "this doesn't feel like a door. It feels like bait." Theric ignored him, motioning the team forward. The moment his boot crossed the threshold, the ripple collapsed inward, and the squad was pulled into a darkness so absolute it felt alive. They landed hard on a smooth, cold surface, their breaths echoing unnaturally as if the walls themselves were amplifying the sound. The chamber was massive, its dimensions too vast to comprehend, but its oppressive presence pressed down on them like a weighted blanket. The walls pulsed faintly with veins of light, crimson and gold threads that twisted and branched like a living organism. The air buzzed faintly, carrying a taste of copper and something bitter that clung to the tongue. "Report," Theric barked, pushing himself upright. "All accounted for," Orlek said, though his voice carried an edge of fear. "But this, it's alive." "Alive or not, we keep moving," Theric said, his tone uncompromising. He activated his scanner, the display flickering erratically as it struggled to adapt to the environment. "Kane, are you reading this?" Static hissed in response, followed by Kane's distorted voice. "Barely. The energy levels in that structure are off the charts. Whatever's powering it, it's ancient, but it's still active." Theric moved toward the center of the chamber, his boots echoing with each step. There, in the heart of the space, stood the node, a massive, crystalline structure that refracted the faint light into chaotic patterns. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, each beat sending waves of energy rippling outward. "It's beautiful," Orlek murmured, his voice awed despite the tension. "Beautiful isn't the word I'd use," Theric replied. He approached cautiously, his weapon raised. "Kane, how do we disable it?" The comm crackled. There should be a core. Look for a central point of convergence, but be careful. If it's adapting like everything else, it won't go down without a fight. Theric nodded, motioning for his team to spread out. As he approached the node, its rhythm quickened, each pulse resonating deeper, vibrating the very air around them. And then, it changed. The light shifted, coalescing into shapes, ghostly figures that flickered in and out of existence. They were humanoid, but wrong, distorted, their forms stretching and twisting as if they were trapped between dimensions. "Lieutenant," Orlick's voice wavered. "What is that?" Theric didn't answer. His focus remained on the node, which now thrummed with an intensity that made his teeth ache. The figures moved closer, their outlines sharpening, their features resolving into something almost recognizable. Faces that seemed human, but carried an otherworldly emptiness in their eyes. "They're not real," Theric said, more to himself than anyone else. But as one of the figures reached out, its hand passed through Orlick's arm, leaving a streak of searing white that made the soldier cry out and stagger back. "Not real, huh?" Orlick growled, clutching his arm. Theric stepped forward, his weapon aimed directly at the core of the node. He could feel the heat radiating from it, the energy thrumming in his bones. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to abandon the mission, but he pressed forward. "Kane, I'm targeting the core," Theric said. "What happens if we destroy it?" Kane's reply was faint, almost drowned out by static. "I don't know. But if it's connected to the drones, it might shut them down." "Might isn't good enough," Theric muttered. But before he could hesitate, the node's light exploded outward, engulfing the chamber in blinding brilliance. The last thing Theric saw before the light consumed him was the figures closing in, their empty eyes filled with something he couldn't comprehend. And then, silence. The bridge was in chaos. Vehl paced between the heads-up displays, his sharp eyes scanning the cascading data. The sensor feeds from the moon had dissolved into static, leaving the fates of Theric and his team shrouded in silence. The only certainty was the energy spike. It roared across the system like a solar flare, destabilizing everything it touched. "Give me an update," Vehl barked, his voice cutting through the tense buzz of the bridge. Kane's face was pale in the flickering glow of his console. "The node's energy is surging. It's spreading across the moon's infrastructure, activating everything. Defensive systems, dormant constructs. Things we didn't even detect are coming online." "And the drones?" Vehl pressed, his tone razor-sharp. "They're evolving," Kane muttered, his fingers tapping rapidly as streams of data poured in. "Faster, more aggressive. They're adapting to every countermeasure we throw at them. Commander, they're treating this like a war simulation, and we're losing." Ryan slammed her hand against her console, frustration bubbling over. "We can't just sit here while the moon tears our fleet apart. We need to hit it with everything we've got." "And risk killing the assault team in the process?" Vehl snapped, rounding on her. His words carried a dangerous edge, but beneath them was a thread of uncertainty he couldn't shake. A jarring tremor shook the flagship, throwing the bridge into chaos. Vehl steadied himself against the railing as alarms screamed to life, the floor beneath his boots vibrating with the unmistakable thud of impact. "Direct hit from the moon's primary cannon," Kane reported grimly. "Our shields are failing. If we don't reposition—" "We hold," Vehl interrupted, his voice cold and deliberate. "If we retreat now, we're finished. Focus fire on the moon's active installations. Force them to redirect their systems." Ryan's expression tightened, but she obeyed, her hands flying over her controls as she relayed Vehl's orders to the fleet. Outside, the void was alive with bursts of light and energy as the Vorshan ships unleashed coordinated strikes on the moon's defenses. The beams carved through the blackness, colliding with the monoliths in cascading explosions that cast fleeting shadows across the lunar surface. But the moon fought back. Its automated turrets retaliated with unrelenting precision, each pulse of energy a brutal reminder of the Vorshan fleet's vulnerability. Ships twisted and burned, their hulls splintering under the weight of ancient firepower. Kane's voice cut through the din. "Commander, I've detected another energy surge. This one's coming from Earth." Vehl froze, his gaze snapping to the main display. The shield encasing Sol 3 pulsed violently, its once fluid patterns hardening into sharp, angular shapes. The glow intensified, casting a faint, surreal light even onto the bridge. "What now?" Vehl muttered, his voice low but filled with dread. "The shield's changing," Kane said, his tone hesitant. "It's not just a barrier anymore, it's—" Before he could finish, the shield fractured. Not shattered, but segmented. The sections peeled back like the petals of some otherworldly flower, revealing glimpses of the planet below. The surface was nothing like the lifeless wasteland they had imagined. Towering structures reached impossibly high into the sky, their surfaces alive with shimmering waves of programmable matter. Massive arcologies sprawled across the continents, their intricate designs pulsating with energy. Oceans shimmered with unnatural colors, their depths glowing faintly, as though hiding secrets too vast to comprehend. A single transmission echoed across the system, clear and chilling. "You were warned." The voice was calm, almost serene, but it carried a weight that struck Vehl like a physical blow. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of inevitability. "Commander," Rain began, her voice unusually quiet, What are we looking at?" "Not ruins," Vehl said, his gaze fixed on the display. "This isn't a graveyard. It's a fortress." The bridge fell silent, the weight of his words settling like a shroud over the crew. Kane broke the silence, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm detecting movement on the planet's surface. Massive constructs are rising from the ground, ships maybe, or weapons. They're activating." Vehl's chest tightened as he processed the implications. Whatever was waking up on Sol 3, it wasn't just defensive, it was mobilizing. "Ryan," Vehl said, his tone measured despite the storm brewing inside him. "Prepare the fleet for a full retreat. We're not equipped to face this." Ryan hesitated, her hands hovering over her console. "Commander, if we run now—" "We'll live to warn the rest of the galaxy," Vehl interrupted, his voice sharp. "This isn't just about us anymore. Whatever's down there, it's bigger than the Vorshan coalition. Bigger than anything we've ever faced." Kane's console beeped urgently, and his face went pale as he read the data. "Commander, I think it's too late." "What do you mean?" Vehl demanded. "The shield isn't just opening," Kane said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's expanding, spreading outward." On the display, the segmented shield continued to unfurl, its glowing tendrils reaching toward the moon, Mars, and beyond. The energy enveloped the Vorshan fleet, washing over their ships like a tidal wave. The bridge lights flickered, and the displays briefly went dark before sputtering back to life. "Status," Vehl barked. "Systems stable," Kane said, though his voice was strained. "But whatever that energy is, it's rewriting our scanners. It's integrating us." "In English, Lieutenant," Vehl snapped. Kane swallowed hard. "It's analyzing everything. Our technology, our strategies, our weaknesses. It's learning from us." The air on the bridge grew heavier, the weight of the moment pressing down on every soul present. "Commander," Ryan said quietly, her gaze fixed on the display, "if this is what it can do while waking up, what happens when it's fully awake?" Vehl didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind raced through every possibility, every strategy, but none of them seemed adequate. The Vorshan fleet was facing something beyond their comprehension, something that had been waiting, dormant and patient, for eons. The transmission echoed again, its calm, chilling tone cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "You were warned. You did not listen. Now you will see." Vehl's breath caught as the display shifted, revealing the surface of Sol 3 in stunning detail. Massive constructs rose from the planet's oceans, their forms sleek and alien, yet disturbingly familiar. They moved with a purpose, their designs suggesting both elegance and devastation. In that moment, Vehl understood. This wasn't a battle they could win. This wasn't a battle at all. "Prepare for immediate retreat," he ordered, his voice firm despite the dread clawing at his chest. "Ryan, signal the fleet. Get us out of here now." The bridge erupted into motion as the crew scrambled to execute Vehl's orders. But even as they moved, Vehl couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late, that the moment they had breached the shield, they had sealed their fate. As the fleet began to retreat, the energy from Sol 3 surged outward, its glow intensifying until it bathed the entire system in an unnatural light. And deep within the heart of the fortress that was Earth, something stirred, a presence that had been waiting, watching, and now awakening. The bridge of the Vorshan flagship was bathed in a pulsing, unnatural glow. The energy tendrils from Sol 3 enveloped the fleet, coiling through the void with the grace of living entities. Heads-up displays flickered as data streams became erratic, struggling to keep up with the sheer magnitude of what was unfolding. The once steady rhythm of commands and responses had devolved into bursts of panicked chatter as systems across the fleet began to falter. Vehl's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Ryan, status on the fleet's retreat." She didn't look up from her console, her focus sharp and unyielding as her fingers darted across the controls. "It's not good, Commander. We've lost contact with 2 of the rear-line cruisers, and the shield's energy is interfering with our jump drives. We can't engage faster than light travel until we clear its reach." "Then get us clear," Vehl said, his tone ice-cold, though his knuckles whitened against the railing. "Every second we stay here is a second we're giving it to finish whatever it's doing." Kane leaned forward, his face illuminated by the erratic glow of his console. "Commander, the energy field isn't just expanding, it's targeting us. It's altering its patterns to corral our ships, herding us toward its constructs." "Like a predator," Rain muttered, her voice low, her usual sharpness dulled by the weight of the realization. "It's not just defense, it's hunting." "Then we stop playing prey," Vehl snapped. "Focus fire on the constructs. We're not going to let it pick us apart one ship at a time." Outside, the void lit up with the ferocity of the Vorshan fleet's assault. Golden lances of energy carved through the darkness, slamming into the massive constructs rising from Earth's surface. Each impact sent shockwaves rippling across the glowing shield, but the constructs barely faltered. Their movements were slow and deliberate, like ancient gods awakening from a millennia-long slumber. One of the nearest constructs, a towering obelisk of liquid metal and shimmering light, shifted, its form reconfiguring with disconcerting fluidity. Panels peeled back, revealing a series of cannons that radiated a pale, bluish energy. They fired in unison, sending bolts of light that cut through the void like falling stars. One of the Vorshan frigates exploded in a cascade of debris, the blast rattling the flagship as Vehl gripped the railing tighter. "Kane!" Vehl barked. "Find me a weakness. Anything, I don't care how insignificant it looks." Kane's hands trembled as he worked, his eyes darting across streams of corrupted data. "I'm trying, Commander, but their technology, it's rewriting itself as we analyze it. Every time we adapt, it adapts faster." Vehl's jaw tightened. The relentless pace of the battle, combined with the sheer unpredictability of their enemy, was unlike anything he'd faced before. Every instinct told him they were outmatched, but he also knew there was no retreat until they broke free. Another tremor shook the bridge, and Vehl staggered briefly before regaining his footing. He turned to Ryan. "How long until we're clear of the shield's reach?" She shook her head grimly. "At least 10 minutes, assuming we can keep the fleet intact that long." "That's an assumption I don't intend to test," Vehl said. "Redirect power to the shields. Sacrifice secondary systems if you have to, but keep those shields up." "And the fleet?" Ryan asked. "Tell them to hold formation," Vehl replied. "We keep fighting. Every ship that falls buys the rest of us another second." Kane suddenly froze, his expression shifting from fear to something colder. "Commander!" "I don't think we're just dealing with constructs." "What do you mean?" Vehl asked, his voice taut. Kane gestured to his console. "I'm detecting signals, multiple frequencies, all originating from the constructs. They're not just machines, they're piloted." The realization hit Vehl like a blow. "Piloted? By what?" Kane hesitated. "I don't know. The signals are layered, fragmented. But if I had to guess, they're not fully awake yet." "Not awake?" Vehl repeated, his voice hollow. You're telling me this is them half asleep? The bridge fell into a tense silence, broken only by the crackle of comm chatter and the occasional burst of static. Outside, the battle raged on, the Vorshan fleet's efforts growing increasingly desperate as more ships succumbed to the construct's relentless assault. "Commander," Rain said, her voice cutting through the din. "We've got incoming. Something big." Vehl turned to the main display, where a new energy signature was surging upward from Sol 3. At first, it was indistinct, a ripple of light that seemed to distort the space around it. But as it rose, its form became clearer. A massive, angular ship, its surface bristling with weapons and layered with glowing veins of energy. It moved with an unsettling grace, its sheer size dwarfing even the largest Vorshan vessels. Kane's voice was barely audible. "That's not a ship. That's a command vessel." "Target it," Vehl ordered, his voice like stone. "Everything we've got." The fleet obeyed, redirecting their fire toward the colossal ship. Beams of energy lanced toward it, striking its surface in blinding flashes. But the command vessel absorbed the impacts with eerie indifference, its shields rippling faintly before settling into stillness. And then it retaliated. A single beam of crimson light erupted from the vessel, cutting through the Vorshan fleet with surgical precision. 3 ships were obliterated in an instant, their destruction punctuated by the distant, muted flare of their reactors. "Commander," Ryan shouted, "we're being locked on." "Evasive maneuvers," Vehl barked. "Break formation." The flagship veered sharply as the beam struck where it had been moments before, the force of the near miss still enough to send shockwaves through the hull. Vehl staggered, but kept his focus, his mind racing through options that grew slimmer by the second. "Kane," Vehl said, his voice low and urgent. "If this is their command vessel, then it's their brain. If we take it out—" Kane shook his head. "If we take it out, Commander, there's no guarantee it'll stop them. For all we know, it'll only make them angrier." "Then we don't have a choice," Vehl said. "We can't outrun them. We can't outfight them. But if we can hit that ship hard enough, maybe we can buy the time we need." Ra'ain glanced at him, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "And if we're wrong?" "Then we're already dead," Vehl said simply. The bridge crew moved with renewed focus, their fear tempered by the faint glimmer of hope Vehl's words provided. Outside, the fleet regrouped, their remaining ships closing ranks as they prepared for one final assault. As the Vorshan ships launched their combined attack, Vehl watched the command vessel, its movements deliberate and unhurried, as though it knew the battle was already won. He clenched his fists, willing himself to believe they still had a chance, but deep down he couldn't shake the feeling that they were exactly where Sol 3 wanted them to be. The command vessel loomed like a shadow of inevitability, its angular form radiating a silent dominance that made the remaining Vorshan ships feel like insects in its presence. On the flagship's bridge, the tension crackled like an electric current. Vehl stood at the center, the weight of his next decisions bearing down like the gravity of a collapsing star. His eyes never left the heads-up display, which showed the colossal enemy vessel advancing with an almost languid menace. "Status," he ordered, his voice cutting through the taut silence. Kane's fingers flew over his console. "The fleet is down to 40%, Commander. We've lost nearly all our heavy cruisers. What remains of our fighter squadrons is regrouping, but they're running out of ammunition. Shields are holding for now, but another direct hit from that thing will tear us apart." "And the retreat?" Vehl asked. Rain didn't look up from her station, her jaw tight. "We're almost clear of the energy field's reach, but the command vessel's cutting us off. If we don't take it out or slow it down, none of us are leaving." Vehl exhaled sharply. "Then we make our stand here." Ryan's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "Here? Commander, if we hold our ground, we'll be crushed." "Not if we turn their strength against them," Vehl countered. His voice didn't rise, but there was an unshakable conviction in his tone. He moved to the central console, gesturing at the glowing tactical map. "Kane, overlay the fleet's remaining resources and position the enemy construct here." Kane complied, and the map shifted, displaying the fractured remains of the Vorshan fleet and the command vessel at the center of the formation. The sheer disparity in power was glaring, but Vehl's focus remained steady. "Here's the plan," Vehl said, his words measured but quick. The command vessel is designed to outlast direct attacks. Its shield absorbs energy and uses it to recharge itself. Conventional strikes are useless. But if we overload it, force it to absorb more energy than it can handle, we can destabilize it. Ryan frowned. Overload it how? We don't have enough firepower left to even scratch it, let alone overload its systems. We don't need raw firepower, Vehl replied. We need coordination. Kane, calculate the frequency of its shield pulses. If we synchronize our attacks with those pulses, we can force the shield into an endless loop of adaptation. That should buy us time to deploy a focused strike directly to its core. Kane's eyes flicked across the data streams. Theoretically, that could work, but the timing would have to be surgical. One misstep, and the feedback could destabilize our systems instead. Then we don't misstep, Vehl said firmly. He turned to Rain. We'll need to bait it into overcommitting its firepower. Deploy our fastest ships to flank it. They're not there to fight, they're there to distract. Ryan nodded, her tension giving way to focus. And the rest of the fleet? Position them here and here, Vehl said, pointing to 2 points on the map. They'll form a pincer, focusing their fire on the shield's weak points. Meanwhile, the flagship will move in directly beneath the command vessel. That's where its energy core is most vulnerable. And the payload? Ryan asked. Vehl's gaze hardened. We'll use the flagship's remaining quantum torpedoes, load every one of them into a single strike. If this works, it'll overload their core and shut down the entire vessel. If it doesn't... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ryan's lips pressed into a thin line, but she gave a sharp nod. Understood. Kane, broadcast the plan to the fleet, Vehl ordered. Make sure every ship understands their role. This only works if we're coordinated. Kane hesitated, glancing up from his console. Commander, you realize this will put the flagship in the center of the blast radius. Vehl met his gaze without flinching. I know. The bridge crew fell silent, their unspoken thoughts hanging heavy in the air. Then, one by one, they returned to their stations, their movement steady despite the tension coursing through them. Outside, the battle shifted. The remnants of the Vorshan fleet moved into position, their sleek, battered forms weaving through the void with a grim purpose. The command vessel reacted immediately, its massive cannons swiveling to target the flanking ships. Beams of crimson energy lanced out, carving through the darkness and narrowly missing their marks as the Vorshan ships executed daring evasive maneuvers. Flanking units in position, Ryan reported, her voice sharp with focus. The command vessel's cannons are locked on them. Good, Vehl said. Kane, what's the shield frequency? Uploading it to the fleet now, Kane replied. Synchronization in 5, 4, 3. The Vorshan ships opened fire in unison, their golden energy beams striking the command vessel's shield at precisely the calculated intervals. The shield rippled violently, its glow fluctuating as it struggled to adapt to the coordinated assault. It's working, Kane said, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. The shield's feedback loop is destabilizing. Keep the pressure on, Vehl ordered. Ryan, prepare the torpedoes. Ryan's hands moved swiftly, her movements precise. Torpedoes armed and ready. The flagship maneuvered beneath the command vessel, its sleek form dwarfed by the massive construct above. The view from the bridge was overwhelming, the enemy vessel's intricate surface glowing with veins of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Firing trajectory locked, Rain said. Waiting on your command, Commander. Vehl stared at the display, his jaw tightening. This was it. Every decision, every sacrifice had led to this moment. Fire! The torpedoes launched in a blinding burst of light, streaking upward toward the command vessel's core. For a moment there was silence, a heartbeat of suspended breath, as the torpedoes struck the shield. Then the core erupted in a cascade of energy, the shockwave rippling outward and engulfing the flagship. The bridge shuddered violently, consoles sparking as the crew struggled to maintain control. Vehl gripped the railing, his eyes fixed on the display as the command vessel began to fracture. Panels tore away, revealing the glowing core within, its light growing brighter and more unstable by the second. Brace for impact, Vehl shouted. The explosion was deafening, a tidal wave of energy that tore through the void. The flagship's shields buckled, and the bridge was plunged into chaos as systems overloaded. Vehl was thrown against the console, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. Around him, the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, their movements frantic but determined. As the light faded, the display showed the remnants of the command vessel drifting in the void, its once imposing form reduced to debris. The shield around Sol 3 flickered, then collapsed entirely. "We did it," Rain said, her voice barely above a whisper. Vehl exhaled slowly, his body sagging with exhaustion. "Get us clear of the debris field. We're not out of this yet." Kane's voice broke through the comms, his tone urgent. "Commander, I'm detecting something from the planet. It's waking up." Vehl's chest tightened as he turned to the display, where new energy signatures were rising from Sol 3. The flagship limped through the void, its hull scarred, its shields flickering with the last vestiges of power. The bridge was silent save for the occasional crackle of damaged systems. Vehl stood at the command console, his face a mask of stoic determination. On the heads-up display, Sol 3 dominated the view, its once hidden surface now fully exposed. Towers of programmable matter spiraled skyward, glowing with a haunting radiance. Energy surged across the planet like veins of molten fire, weaving a lattice that pulsed with an ancient rhythm. Kane's voice shattered the fragile quiet. "Commander, multiple energy signatures rising from the surface. They're massive, larger than anything we've encountered before." Vehl didn't flinch. "Define massive." Kane hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously at his console. "They dwarf the command vessel, sir. They're planetary-scale constructs, and they're moving." The display zoomed in on the planet, revealing colossal forms emerging from Earth's oceans and landscapes. One rose from the Pacific, its surface shedding water like a titan awakening from slumber. Another erupted from a desert, its structure impossibly intricate, radiating an aura that twisted light around it. Each was unique, their designs a seamless blend of art and weaponry, their movements deliberate yet unrelenting. Ryan leaned forward, her voice low. "They were never meant to defend. These things, they're designed to dominate." "Status on the fleet?" Vehl asked, his tone clipped. "Most of our remaining ships are operational but damaged," Ryan replied. "We're in no condition to take on something of this scale." Vehl nodded, his mind racing. The Vorshan fleet had been reduced to fragments, its finest ships obliterated. The command vessel had been a monumental threat, yet these constructs made it look like a mere pawn. Still, retreating wasn't an option. Not anymore. "They're not just moving," Kane said, his voice tight. "They're forming a pattern, a web of energy around the planet. It's expanding outward." Vehl's gut churned as he studied the display. The constructs weren't merely activating, they were constructing something far larger, something that would ripple beyond the solar system. A single thought struck him like a hammer. Whatever humanity had left behind, it wasn't meant to stay confined to Sol 3. Ryan's voice sharpened. "If that field spreads, it'll pull everything within range into its grasp. Ships, planets, stars. It'll rewrite the galaxy itself." Vehl turned to her, his expression hard. "Then we don't let it." Kane looked up, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "Commander, you're not seriously suggesting—" "We hit them before the field stabilizes," Vehl interrupted. "Whatever they're building, it's not finished yet. If we strike now, we might disrupt it." "Might," Ryan pressed. "We're out of options," Vehl said bluntly. "If we leave now, they'll follow. And if they follow, the Vorshan coalition and every civilization we've ever known will be gone." The silence on the bridge was deafening. Then, slowly, Ryan straightened, her jaw tightening. "What's the plan?" Vehl's eyes locked onto the display, his voice steady. "Kane, scan the constructs. Look for any vulnerabilities. Points where their energy flows intersect. Ryan, have the fleet prepare every remaining weapon we have. This isn't about survival anymore. It's about making sure whatever's down there never leaves this system." Kane's hands flew across his console. Commander, the energy lattice is strongest here, where the construct's fields converge. If we hit that point hard enough, we could destabilize the entire system. But it won't be enough to just disrupt the lattice, Rain said, her tone grim. We'll need to destroy at least one of the constructs outright. If even one survives, it could rebuild. Vehl nodded. Then we focus all our fire on the weakest one. Kane, identify it. The construct in the Pacific, Kane replied. Its energy output is lower than the others. But, Commander, even if we take it out, the resulting backlash will take us with it, Vehl finished. I'm aware. Ryan's gaze softened just for a moment. You don't have to do this, Commander. Vehl met her eyes, his expression unyielding. If we don't, no one else will. The orders were given, the plan set. Across the fleet, battered ships moved into formation, their movements sluggish but purposeful. Energy reserves were rerouted to weapon systems, shields reinforced with whatever power remained. Every ship carried the weight of inevitability, its crew knowing this was their final stand. As the fleet approached the Pacific construct, the enormity of their enemy became clear. The Titan loomed above the ocean, its form rippling with energy, its surface shimmering like liquid crystal. Waves crashed against its base, sending cascades of light into the air. Vehl stood at the command console, his voice unwavering. Target the lattice, then concentrate fire on the construct. No holding back. The first salvo erupted from the fleet, beams of golden light streaking toward the lattice. The field rippled violently, the energy distorting as it struggled to adapt. The Pacific construct reacted immediately, its surface shifting as panels opened to reveal massive cannons. Bolts of blue energy lanced toward the fleet, tearing through the void with unrelenting force. Shields at critical, Rain called, bracing herself against her station. We can't take another hit like that. We won't need to, Vehl replied. Kane, status on the lattice. It's destabilizing, Kane said, his voice tight, but the construct's core is compensating. We'll need to hit it directly. Vehl nodded. Ryan, fire the torpedoes, all of them. The flagship's torpedoes launched in a brilliant arc, streaking toward the Pacific construct. The first wave struck its surface, sending shock waves rippling across its form. The second wave penetrated deeper, igniting a cascade of explosions that illuminated the construct's core, a pulsing sphere of energy that seemed to twist the fabric of reality around it. Direct hit, Ryan shouted. The core's destabilizing. The construct let out a deafening, otherworldly groan as its core began to implode. The lattice shattered, sending fragments of energy cascading across the battlefield. The remaining constructs faltered, their movements sluggish as the system unraveled. But the Pacific construct wasn't finished. Its core erupted in a final desperate burst of light, the shockwave tearing through the fleet. The flagship shuddered violently, its systems failing one by one as the crew struggled to stay upright. Impact in 3, 2... Kane's voice was drowned out as the shockwave engulfed the flagship, and everything went white. When the light faded, the battlefield was eerily still. The constructs were gone, their forms reduced to scattered debris. The energy lattice had dissipated, leaving Sol 3 silent once more. Vehl opened his eyes, his vision swimming. The bridge was in ruins, consoles sparking, the air thick with heat. He pushed himself upright, his gaze falling on the display. The planet remained, its surface still glowing faintly, but the threat had been neutralized. Ryan coughed, her voice hoarse. Did we stop it? For now, Vehl said, his voice heavy. But it wasn't just a warning, it was a message. They wanted us to know what they were capable of. Kane's voice was quiet. What if this was just the beginning? Vehl stared at Sol 3, his chest tight. Then we've bought time, and sometimes time is enough. The flagship drifted, its crew battered but alive, as the planet below remained an enigma, a sleeping giant that had stirred just enough to remind the galaxy why it had been left alone.